Mina domo. Japanese, as of today, is a language isolate, ignoring the Ryukyu and Hachijo languages, which are considered mere dialects by some. We will not debate that today, but rather attempts at classifying the Japonic languages within larger language families. Also, to make this a bit less dry, and trust me, it's going to be very dry at times, we are gonna rank every single one of the theories on a tier list, and then we'll see the final tier list at the end. But anyway, I guess we should first try to find out where the Japonic languages even originate from, so we can determine their relationship to other languages and language families. Well, they originate from somewhere around here, from around Manchuria or Korea, before migrating to modern-day Japan after having contact with Proto-Koreanic, where both languages influenced each other. That already shows a problem at determining the classification of Japanese, because not just Korean, but above all Chinese had a huge influence on Japanese, and there's a huge amount of Chinese loanwords that have led to the extinction of many Japanese words that we might have been able to connect to other languages, but that we have no record of nowadays. But that aside, let's dive into the hypotheses now. The plausible, the unlikely, and the batshit ridiculous ones. Let's start with an obvious one if you look at the geography, the Japonic Koreanic hypothesis. I let you guess which modern languages that includes. Unsurprisingly, it tries to connect Japanese to Korean, or rather Japonic to Koreanic, but I'm just gonna say Japanese from now on instead of Japonic. But anyway, what are the arguments for this? Other than the geographical proximity, let's dive into the structure of Korean and Japanese. Both follow a subject-object-verb word order, or SOV for short. However, that's kind of a nothing burger, considering it's the most popular word order in the world. Another similarity is that both languages are agglutinative languages, which, in simple terms, means gluing words together out of different elements, hence the name. For example, in English you have the word anti-disestablishmentarianism, which combines several prefixes and suffixes. That's a bit of an extreme example, of course, but that's basically how agglutinative languages works. Although English isn't an agglutinative one, it was just an example word. Anywho, back to Korean and Japanese, they both are also null subject languages, which means you can leave out the subject of the sentence and they're both topic prominent, which basically means that the topic is emphasized instead of the subject of a sentence. Vocabulary wise though, other than loanwords, Japanese and Korean aren't very similar. Yet, they both put a lot of emphasis on honorifics, which I personally would attribute more to influencing each other over the years. There's also this sheet comparing phone numbers that happen to be similar in Old Japanese and Goguryeo, an old language that might be Koreanic. But let's not open that can of worms, that's a whole other video. Either way, the split must have happened millennia ago, before written records existing. According to Starostein's calculations, between 5000 and 6000 years ago, Proto-Japonic Koreanic was a thing, which would mean that it split a bit later than that. Though of course that calculation is just a theory and of course flawed in its own ways, so let's not take it as an objective fact, but rather as something that might be. But anyway, let's rank it on the tier list, and I'm giving it a solid A tier. I do believe it was more of a Sprachbund, but compared to other theories we will cover, it is very solid, although not that creative. But now, let's move on to the next theory, one that was very popular in the past, but nowadays is often discredited. It's Altaic, which primarily consists of Turkic, Mongolic and Tungusic languages, but sometimes also includes Koreanic and Japonic. For the following segment, my primary sources are Gunnar Holmberg's bachelor thesis Japanese, Austronesian and Altaic, a study of possible connections, and Yuko Igarashi's text Japanese as an Altaic language, an investigation of Japanese genetic affiliation biological finding. The text summarizes the segment pretty well, but also very much oversimplifies some things, which I will also do both for clarity's sake and because the proof for these theories isn't the best, so it isn't worth covering too much in a summary video. Firstly, it is questionable whether Altaic even is a family or not. Nowadays, Altaic in Western linguistics is very much discredited. However, that's not the topic of this video, but rather what the arguments are for Japonic belonging to this language family. Firstly, All the criticisms for Japonic and Koreanic being a language family apply here, because for Japonic to be Altaic, the hypothesis is that it is also so alongside Koreanic. Arguments for these two language families belonging to Altaic are structural similarities to the other Altaic languages. According to Purrple, these are: firstly, opposition of long vowels versus short vowels; secondly, stress and pitch; thirdly, vowel and consonant harmony; fourthly, internal sandhi; number 5, word structure, which can be subdivided into A, agglutination, B, the stem, and C, the suffixes; and lastly, number 6, word categories, primarily verbs, nouns, pronouns, and postpositions. And now I will explain all those terms, because I kind of doubt that most people understood all of them. So yeah, let's firstly explain vowel and consonant harmony, which just means that certain phonemes within a word match others based on the form of the word. This is most common with vowels and, for example, through lip rounding or adjusting your tongue in position. An example of this would be in Hungarian plurals. For example, the Hungarian word ember means person. The plural would be emberek, meaning people. But if we take the word ház, meaning house, the plural would be házak and not házek, or another plural form based on the vowel. Next, sandy, yeah, I think I mispronounced it earlier. Anyway, sandy, I think that's how we pronounce it, just means sound changes at morpheme or word boundaries. An example of internal sandhi, which is at morpheme boundaries, would be sin and pathy, becoming sympathy and not sympathy. Then next we have a stem in the base form of a word. For example, in English you would have the verb watch, which is the stem, but then you would add eat to make it the past watched. The same works with nouns by taking suffixes like a watch becoming watches in the plural, where watch is the stem. The other categories I assume you already know, because I already explained agglutination. Otherwise you can leave a comment or add something you don't understand. So yeah, these are the supposed grammatical arguments for Koreanic and Japonic being Altaic languages. The vocabulary argument is even worse, with just 359 of 2055 etymological entries of Japanese seeming to descend from Altaic. According to Martin Wobeat's 2005 book, Is Japanese Related to Korean, Tungusic, Mongolic and Turkic? Even if we keep in mind that slightly more than half of Japanese words come from Chinese, though it is questionable how many of those are everyday words like the etymological entries, 359 is really low. It should still be at least half if we assume that the other half is Chinese. So yeah, Altaic, it's not very likely either. I am actually placing this one in F tier, for neither making sense nor being creative. We could also talk about substrates and superstrates or whatever, but it would still land in F tier, and that would be even drier than it already was. Also, just a little warning, from now on the views just get sillier and even more ridiculous, and the evidence becomes even more scarce, so I will go into less detail because they're all kind of unlikely and not very well proven. So anyway, let's move on to something more fun than all the boring Altaic talk. Japanese as an Austronesian language, and this was actually the one that inspired this video because I thought the idea was kind of funny. According to the same source as before, there is the hypothesis that Japanese is the mix of an Altaic superstratum and an Austronesian substratum. Now, what do either of these words mean? A superstratum is basically a prestigious and dominant language enforced by the political elite, and substratum what is spoken by the subordinates. So Japanese is actually just the Asian version of English according to this hypothesis, with Altaic being French, well, or I guess Old Norman to be specific. I am giving the subtheory a D because Altaic, but it's also unique. Altaic aside, let's talk about the arguments for Japanese being an Austronesian language, without all that Altaic shenanigans. Firstly, Japan is close to Taiwan and the Malay archipelago. In fact, the Austronesian languages originate from Taiwan. So some linguists, like Hulahan Yunan, suggest that the island of Shikoku in southern Japan had an Austronesian population. This leads us back to the superstratum-substratum talk, except instead of Altaic, some also propose Korean. But let's finally move away from the superstrati and substrati. Another argument for Japanese being Austronesian is that it's phonologically quite simple and similar to the Austronesian languages. Here's a chart of consonants in Japanese and Malay. Although they are similar, in my opinion that's not really great evidence, because related languages can all have a quite diverse phonology, while unrelated ones can be similar. Either way, it is time to rank this hypothesis. I find the idea fun, so I want to give it an A. After all, this ranking is based on completely artificial factors and not probability. So this is going into A tier because if we rank them all based on probability, nearly all of them would be in F tier. And I guess Japonic Koreanic would be in D tier. Next one, we are looking at the Dravidian languages, because every language in Eurasia has to be related to Dravidian. And for this we need to assume that Japonic and Koreanic are related because the fewer links Dravidian to Koreanic and Koreanic to Japonic. That's always a great condition and a very creative one. So anyway, what are the arguments linking Koreanic and Dravidian, and with that Japonic and Dravidian? Well, the argument is that Koreanic and Dravidian are agglutinative and follow SOV word order. Also, Dravidian supposedly migrated to Korea and Japan. This migration pattern is based on another bad shit hypothesis known as Turanian, which links every Eurasian language other than Indo-European, Semitic and Sino-Tibetan. Also, even in this theory, whether Japonic and Koreanic are included is ambiguous, while Dravidian is included. There really isn't a lot more to support this theory, and it gets its own tier below F, because I really fucking hate this theory. Why do we have to link every language to Dravidian or Sumerian? And also there are arguments I didn't include which also suck, so here's a Twitter thread for all of you to enjoy, it's going to be linked in the description. Now, as for the next one, I thought this one was going to be a bit more exciting, but I didn't really find any arguments during my surface level research, because I'm not wasting my time on a theory that only sometimes includes Japonic, alongside Koreanic of course. This theory I'm talking about is called Proto-Asian and includes Sino-Tibetan, Hmong-Mien, Kra-Dai, Austronesian, Austroasiatic, and of course sometimes Koreanic and Japonic. The argument I found is that some vocabulary sounds similar, however the list I did found neither included Japonic nor Koreanic. So yeah, this is going into the same tier as the one above. Alright, finally our last theory. And finally one that is at least slightly less ridiculous. Japanese and Ainu being related. Now, by less ridiculous I definitely do not mean likely. Just a bit less out of the blue, unlike Dravidian and Japanese for example. According to the Wikipedia page, Japanese linguist Tatsumine Katayama found many similarities between basic Ainu and Japanese words. I tried to find the source that they cited but didn't find it. In that case, it's a good thing I'm using the tier list as an excuse to cover up my not wanting to pour hours down into ridiculous theories, because thanks to tier list I can pretend like this is a fun video and not an educational one. So any errors in this video are of course for entertainment and not because of my own laziness or stupidity. Anyway, back to the theory. According to him, there are a lot of similarities between the phonology, the grammar is similar, and the geographical and cultural connections between Japanese and Ainu. I can't judge any of that because I don't speak any Ainu, although I do know some basic Japanese. He concluded Japanese is closely related to Ainu and was heavily influenced by Chinese and Korean. The last part is definitely true, especially Chinese. As mentioned before, Chinese loanwords actually make up more than around half of Japanese words. However, as for the grammar, as I said, I don't speak Ainu, but going through the Wikipedia page, Ainu indicates plurals through a suffix. Japanese does not. I think that's pretty important, because it's a pretty major change. Additionally, Ainu conjugates based on person, including first person plural and singular, and it even has a fourth person. Japanese does not conjugate based on person. I also found an article about Ainu with some example words. Here's a list of verbs. Unless we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of years, I kind of doubt that something as major as changing from person-based conjugation to a non-person-based conjugation system would really make sense. So yeah, as we can see here, the verb endings are quite mixed. I don't really know whether there's a pattern because, as I said, I don't speak Ainu, but to me it does seem a bit random, although I can't really judge that because, as I said, I don't speak Ainu. Japanese verb endings look nothing like that. Infinitives in Japanese are either you, like in nome. Okay, that doesn't sound like new, but trust me, there's a new there. There's a new there, alright? And that is a godan verb, which means to drink. All Japanese verbs end in ru, like in miru. an Ichidan verb which means to see. There are also Godan verbs that look like Ichidan verbs, but that's not the topic of this video. And yeah, both kind of end with an U, but trust me, they're different verb categories and we aren't getting into that because this is a channel about linguistics and history and all the stuff I currently care about and not really about learning Japanese. So if you want to do that, you should go check out other channels. Also, I will not go through every single word and explain how it looks nothing like its Japanese counterpart, except for got. The word for got, which we can see here, kamui, actually sounds similar to the Japanese one kami. I looked up the etymologies and they seem to be related, but that's the exception, not the norm. Due to contact between the two languages, they both loaned from each other, so that is probably just a loan word. Although it's not clear whether it's the Japanese word in Ainu or an Ainu word in Japanese. But yeah, I definitely disagree with this theory. Yet I do think it's kind of fun, so I'm giving it a C instead of something worse. Especially because of kamui and kami sounding similar, even though it's a loan word, but I don't really care about that, let's just pretend like it's not a loan word. So now we are done with all the theories listed on the Wikipedia page with the same topic. So now it is time for my own input, and unfortunately the next two are under the see also part of the Wikipedia page, but I swear I discovered them on my own before looking there. Well, at least the first one, not the second one, that one I did really just take from the see also page. So yeah, bonus theory number 1, or theory number 7 is Eurasiatic. Actually, here's a map of it. You will see Japan isn't marked, but depending to some it should be. Either way, I automatically love every language classification hypothesis that links inward to Finnish, so I don't even need to hear any arguments, this would be an easy S tier for me. However, due to Japanese not always being included, nor Sino-Tibetan and Polynesian, it is sadly going into F tier, at least when we're talking about Japonic classifications. After all, this is a ranking for Japonic classifications and not just me ranking theories which happen to include Japanese sometimes. Plus, most of the languages we talked about here and theories relating them to Japanese aren't included here. So yeah, good luck trying to find any arguments for that. The next one is related to this one because Eurasiatic is a sub-branch of this one. It is number 8 or bonus one number 2, Nostratic. Now I don't know what the arguments for this are, but it does include the Dravidian. Usually I think linking every single language on the earth to the Dravidian languages is annoying. But if you're gonna link nearly the entirety of Eurasia and America, you should include Dravidian. So yeah, I think it is an improvement, but linking Japanese to nearly every other language on earth is boring. D tier. Now, we are entering my own theories. Personally, I believe Japanese is related to Sumerian. Here is my proof. Sura means those. You know what those is in Japanese? Sura. And that sounds quite similar, doesn't it? But sadly I just lied. Sura means distant, I think. I didn't find a dictionary for Sumerian, but it's based on the song, I assume it actually means distant. So yeah, this theory is based on my own misconception of the song at first. So sadly, yeah, this is going into F tier. This is a very bad theory. Although, my proof is of course better than half the proof we discussed. Then 10thly, let us discuss Japanese as a Papuan language. Firstly, there are so many Papuan languages, over 1,000 in fact, so statistically Japanese is most likely to be a Papuan language. Purely mathematically, there's a good chance I'm right. There are also over 30 language families included in Papuan, so why shouldn't Japonic be one of many? Next, let us discuss Papuan features and whether they are found in Japanese. Though of course Papuan languages vary a lot and are very diverse, just like Japanese is diverse from them. But 5 simple vowels, check. Few consonants, well, kind of. Japanese has 12 or more, it isn't really clear. However, that is less than a lot of languages. It is also less than Abun, a Papuan language with 20 consonants. So yeah, I think this one counts. I think we're counting this one as a W. Problem we have, however, is when we look at grammar. A lot of Papuan languages have a future tense. Japanese does not have a future tense. In fact, conjugations in general are pretty different. Although developing a future tense is not really that unheard of, even if your proto-language didn't have a future tense. One must only look at the Indo-European languages compared to Hittite. Although that's a whole other can of worms if Indo-European languages even have a future tense, because is it really a tense if you need an auxiliary verb? I will not discuss that, that's a whole different other question. But yeah, the theory sadly falls apart thanks to the conjugations being pretty different. Even if Japanese and Papuan languages lack a plural for nouns, which is a similarity between them. So we can already stop here comparing them. Sadly, this one is going into D tier. Why D tier instead of F? Well, mathematics and probability or something like that. I'm probably right. And lastly, we have Kartvelian. They are not even slightly similar, however, I am half Georgian, so every language in the world descends from Georgian. Proto-World is actually just a dialect of Georgian, trust me. So yeah, sadly, also D tier. So, those were all of the theories. This is by far my longest video so far. Although I don't know how long it is while recording this, because half of my recording is just outtakes. But yeah, write down in the comments which one you think is the likeliest. Or if you think Japanese is poorly and isolated. Also, I can't really believe that at the time of writing the script nobody else had the idea to make a video about the classification of the Japonic languages. Truth is, it could have been researched more thoroughly, but the theories were too ridiculous for me to spend months reading obscure texts I can't find. Anyway, the next video is gonna release in 2030. And remember to go vote in the 2029 Japanese election. Mata ne!